Shana Tova and Boker Tov.
Boker Tov.
It is so wonderful to see you, and it's so wonderful, too, to have so many folks join us online as well. And it's easy, I think, for you to see our smiles. We're thrilled to see you. It's hard to see if you're smiling or not. I think we all have to work on how we do that. Yeah, exactly.
Smiles. Got to smile.
Yeah, we got to use our eyes, but it's just terrific to be with you. And, it's right to smile today. Indeed, this is the most joyful day on the Jewish calendar. A little hard to believe, but it's true that this is the most joyful day because this was the day when the second tablets were given on Mount Sinai. And this, too, is a day when we get to recommit to one another and recommit to our covenant. And so I don't know how joyful you're feeling this moment. I don't know how joyful you'll feel at 6 or 7 o'clock tonight, but it is a joy to be with you. We also want to ensure your comfort throughout this service, and if you're staying with us throughout the afternoon. We sit in this beautiful place, this beautiful chapel, but of course we cannot control the sun. And so as the sun shifts, and if you're finding yourself hot or uncomfortable, please feel free to pick up a chair and move to some place around here that gives you shade and comfort. And last but not least, if you are joining us online and you do not have our guidebook for this day, this Machzor Mishkan HaNefesh, I invite you to find a link to this Machzor on our website. There's a flip book for you. One last piece, we'll be joined by our other colleagues too in just a little bit. They are finishing up our family service down at Mitchell Park, I was down there for a bit of it. It is a beautiful experience there. So you'll see them come in soon. So without further ado, let's get started. We begin with the singing of Ma Tovu on page 138.
Ma Tovu.
page 170, we sing Psalm 150, a reminder to sing out words of thanks and praise with every instrument at our disposal. Page 170. If you're able, I invite you to rise as we turn to our call to prayer, our call to worship, our prayer of community, Baruch Hu, on page 178. Page 181. Like an unbroken current, energy streams from the source, bathing the planet in light, calling forth life, movement, mind unfolding from matter, the power to love. And we offer it back to you, our own creative energy, ever dreaming, building, shaping patterns out of chaos, searching out light in the darkness. Creation never ceases, not for an instant. All life is aglow with your light. All things draw sustenance from the source. Baruch atah Adonai, Yotzer HaMeorot. Continue on page 186, words of Shema. seated as we turn to page 188. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
All throughout these holidays, our method for drawing closer to one another and to God is through our offerings of words. And during these services, we have invited members of our congregation to offer themselves up through offering reflections on the high holidays and their meaning to them. And so it's a pleasure now to invite one of our congregants forward, Kristen Yawitz, to share with us her reflections on these holy days.
Two years ago, during High Holy Days, you may remember news reports of a shofar that had been hidden and used by Jewish prisoners at Auschwitz. Professor Judith Tidor Balmont-Schwartz of Bar Ilan University donated the shofar, which her father had helped safeguard, to the Museum of Jewish Heritage in New York for its exhibit, Auschwitz, Not Long Ago, Not Far Away. Professor Balmont-Schwartz told reporters that her father, Haskell Tidor, had heard about the shofar being used, but never saw it until January 1945, on the death march of prisoners from Auschwitz, as Soviet forces closed in on the camp. Somebody came up to our father, handed him a package wrapped in rags, it was the shofar, and said, "I'm not going to survive this. Maybe you will take this shofar out. Bring it to the world. Tell them we had a shofar here in Auschwitz." I read that story with awe. I didn't see myself in the story. I saw people with courage that I could not imagine. And this is the response that I often have when I read stories of Jewish faithfulness to the covenant in the most extreme circumstances. I feel these are giants, people beyond me, far beyond me. They are giants, but I must not see them as more than I can be. I mustn't stand on the shore with my arms crossed saying, Nachshon has a higher risk tolerance than I do. In Deuteronomy 29:9, we read, "You stand this day, all of you, before the Lord your God, your tribal heads, your elders, and your officials, all the men of Israel, your children, your wives, even the stranger within your camp, from wood chopper to water drawer, to enter into the covenant of the Lord your God. The wood chopper and the water drawer and I are not bystanders. We are part of the covenant. As my friend Noah heard her young daughter tell a schoolmate, I am a Jewish people." And what a people. When we discussed this passage, Nitzavim, you stand this day, weeks ago in Torah study, one of the first questions was, Rabbi, how many times do we have to make this covenant? And yet, there is no mistaking our seriousness about that covenant today. As we stand together and recite the Vidui, confessing our failures and seeking forgiveness before the gates close. We confess as a people, an Am, and our fidelity as a people to community over egoism, repair over unconcern, honesty over facade, creates this inspiring surround in which I can claim the promise of Deuteronomy 30:14. For this word is very close to you. It is within your mouth and your heart to complete it. What I cannot do alone, I can be called to do by this community. During this last year of extreme circumstances, your determination and ethical brilliance and profound kindness carried me. I borrowed courage from you like a coat that I haven't grown into yet. In a CBC interview, Professor Balmo Schwartz explained that her father was a work dispatcher at Auschwitz. She said, prayer and gatherings of any kind were, of course, impossible to do in such a camp. If you were caught, you were killed. But he knew that if he would send religious or Orthodox prisoners who wanted to pray far, far away from the center of the main camp, there was a good chance there would be fewer guards watching them. So he sent as many people as he could to such a faraway commando. One of his friends who he had sent came to him and said, Haskell, you won't believe it. Somebody had a shofar. Somebody blew a shofar. The wood chopper, the water drawer, and I are not Nachshon. We may fret about the risk of hiding a shofar. But who we are now is not the final word on who we may be. We Jews are commanded to bring our imperfect selves and our whole hearts to the shared work of repair and renewal, and that work changes us. It would be a mistake if in trying to let go of our self-importance, we also let go of our importance to that shared work, that larger story. The larger story both needs us and points beyond us. Professor Balmo Schwartz said of her late father, if he were here today, he would look around and he would look at me and say, Mama, look, why are you talking about me? But I would tell him, Daddy, I'm not just talking about you. I'm talking about the shofar. You stand this day, all of you, before the Lord your God, to enter into the covenant. Gemar Chatima Tova.
Thank you, Kristen. If you were as blown away as I by the profundity of Kristen's reflection, you have an opportunity to learn and hear more from her this fall as she leads a workshop. I think it's called the Mishkan Project, is that correct? I encourage you to be with her and to study with her. In those moving words, you used a phrase that got right at this next moment of our service. You talked about our risk tolerance, and you pointed to Nachshon, and you were referring to that moment at the sea when Nachshon went in first. We're about to sing that song together. And why do we sing it? To raise our tolerance for risk, to be inspired by that moment. We sing it on this day. And so we continue now with the singing of Micha Mocha on page 196.
מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, לא ראיתי והים. יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ויאמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. צור ישראל קומה בעזרת ישראל ופתחנו ממך יהודה וישראל גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו קדוש ישראל ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
In the depths of night, by the edge of the river, Jacob was left alone. In heartfelt longing, in the temple of God, Hannah uttered her prayer alone. In the barren wilderness, in doubt and despair, Elijah found God alone. On the holiest day, in the Holy of Holies, the high priest entered alone. We are bound to one another in myriad ways, but each soul needs time to itself. In solitude, we meet the solitary one. Silence makes space for the still small voice. For the psalmist says, deep calls unto deep. From the depths of our soul, we seek what is most profound. Tefillah begins on page 198.
Adonai Svatai Tiftach Adonai Svatai Tiftach Ufi Yagid Tilatecha Ufi Yagid Tilatecha. Adonai Svatai Tiftach Adonai Svatai Tiftach Ufi Yagid Tilatecha Ufi Yagid Tilatecha. Adonai Svatai Tiftach Adonai Svatai Tiftach Ufi Yagid Tilatecha Ufi Yagid Tilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avoteinu v'Imotenu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak ve'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel ve'Elohei Leah הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, עליון. גומל חסדים טובים וקונה הכל וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה. זוכרנו לחיים, מלך חפץ בחיים, וקודמנו בספר החיים למענך. אלוהים חיים למענך, למענך. אלוהים חיים למענך, למענך. אלוהים חיים למענך, למענך. אלוהים חיים למענך, מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע. מחכה חיים בחסד, מחייך ברחמים רבים, סומך טובים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. בכמוך בעל גבורות ומידה מלך, מלך באמת ומחיה ומצליח ישועה. מי כמוך האל הרחמים, זוכר יצוריו לחיים ברחמים, ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיה הכל.
Please be seated.
Thank you, Rabbi Heath, for picking up the
The words of the Unetaneh Tokef are old, and the language was theirs. But the call is real, and the message is ours. Take hold of your life while you still have the chance, for your story will end, and it might be this year in a way you don't know. Take hold of your life. Make things right while you can, and don't miss this call, the call of Unetaneh Tokef. Page 208.
Unetaneh Tokef Kedusha Hayom Ki hu nora ve'ayom Uvo tinaseh malchutecha v'yikon bechesed kisecha v'teshev alav be'emet emet ki ata hu dayan umochiach v'yodea va'ed v'chotem v'chotem v'sofer umoneh v'tizkor kol hanishkachot v'tiftach et sefer hazichronot v'tiftach et sefer hazichronot u'meilav yikarei v'chotam yad kol adam bo.
Page 212.
Berosh Hashanah Yikatevu V'yom Tzom Kippur V'yom Tzom Kippur Yechatevu Berosh Hashanah Yikatevu V'yom Tzom Kippur V'yom Tzom Kippur Yechatevu Berosh Hashanah Yikatevu V'yom Tzom Kippur Yechatevu Kama yaverun V'chama v'chama yebareun Berosh Hashanah Yikatevu V'yom Tzom Kippur V'yom Tzom Kippur Yechatevu
בראש השנה ייכתבו וביום צום כיפור ייכתבו בראש השנה ייכתבו וביום צום כיפור
Page 214.
ותשובה ותפילה וצדקה מעבירים את ראש זימה.
But through return to the right path, through prayer and righteous giving, we can transcend the harshness of the decree. Please rise for Kedusha on page 218.
נקדש את שמך בעולם, נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאיך וקרא זה אל זה ואמר.
Kadosh, 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 We continue privately through page 250. And when you have completed your prayer, please be seated.
Okay.
Sim shalom, sim shalom, sim shalom.
Page 246.
Malkeinu Avinu, kulanu kechad be'or panecha, kiryat panecha, natata lanu Adonai Eloheinu, Torah chaim ve'ahavat chesed u'tzedakah u'bracha ve'rachamim ve'chaim v'shalom. לברך את עמך ישראל ואת כל העמים בכל עת ובכל שעה בשלומך.
שים shalom, שים shalom, שים shalom, שים shalom, חן
וחסד ורחמים
עלינו ועל כל ישראל עמך. שים shalom, shalom, שים shalom.
ברוך אתה אדוני
Baruch Shemo.
עושה
Azibaka kashachar orecha, v'aruchatecha mehera titzmach. Then your light will cleave like the dawn, and your healing will spring up quickly. I love these hopeful words from Isaiah. They are embroidered on my talit. Before preparing for these high holy days, however, I hadn't explored the word for healing in this verse, arucha. We are more accustomed to the word refuah or refuah shlema, a complete healing, but arucha is unusual. It appears only 6 times in the Bible. Metaphorically, arucha refers to the new flesh that grows at the wounded spot. It is the tender skin revealed when a scab falls off. Arucha also shares a root with the Hebrew word for long or lengthy. And this has been a long year of waiting for healing. Scabbed, fragile, fractured, wounded, we have gathered together on this day in person and online. Azibaka kashacha orecha, v'aruchatecha mehera titzmach. These words are from this morning's Haftarah, Isaiah's critique of the Yom Kippur practices of his time. It includes this well-known admonishment. Is Sech the fast I desire, a day for men to starve their bodies and for lying in sackcloth and ashes? Do you call that a fast? No. This is the fast I desire, to unlock the bonds of wickedness, to set free those who have been crushed. It is to share your bread with the hungry and to take the wretched poor into your home. When you see the naked, to clothe them and not to ignore your own kin. Then, like the dawn, your light will cleave and your healing will spring up quickly. Then, when you call, God will answer. When you cry, God will say, Hineni, here I am. And here we are. It is so good to see you, and to know that so many others who could not risk being here are with us online. Back on Friday night, July 2nd, which feels like a very distant memory, I thought I'd be seeing so much more of you, and we'd be seeing so much more of each other. Perhaps you were here on that beautiful evening. For the first time since March 2020, we had reopened our campus for Kabbalat Shabbat, and we had begun reopening ourselves to each other. Believing we had emerged from the darkness of this pandemic, we recited Birkat HaGomel, the blessing for having passed through danger. But now, once again, it is risky to enter our sanctuary, to come together in our synagogue. According to the Mishnah, 7 days before he entered his synagogue on Yom Kippur, the high priest was placed in a type of quarantine. He was separated from his family and brought from his house to a room in the temple designated specifically for him. The night before Yom Kippur, last night, the high priest was kept occupied to prevent him from sleeping, or so the Mishnah states. If he was a scholar, he would teach Torah. If he was not a scholar, Torah scholars would teach Torah to him. And during that long night of study, the high priest was reminded that the Torah reveals its wisdom through binary pairings that communicate an encompassing totality. Heaven and earth, God and humans, curse and blessing. Usually, when you don't understand one concept in the Torah, you just need to read more, to read further, until you encounter the first idea's pair, its clarifying complement, a second concept serving to define the first, while the first does the same for the second. According to Genesis, the whole world was in disorder, tohu vavohu, tumult. But then God came along and made separations. God made pairs, water, land, night, day, separate but bound entities that together comprise a deep, coherent structure judged as good and very good. This is a priestly worldview. The priests had this thing about pairs: kosher, treif, pure, impure, sin, atonement. Throughout the week when he was separated from his family, the high priest would have boned up on this expiation ritual for Yom Kippur. A pair of goats. One was consecrated to God, sacrificed on the altar. Its basar, its flesh, consumed by the priests. And one was made the scapegoat, upon which the high priest would lay the transgressions of the people and set it free to wander in the wilderness. To see the worldview of the priest, the priestly writers of the Torah, is to see much, not all, but much of our world and so much of ourselves. It is to see the coherence of the 10-day period that we are concluding today and our purpose in gathering here and online. For in this totality, ritual is the binary pair of story, one the clarifying complement for the other. If we can better understand our stories, then we can better understand who and where we are and what precisely we are doing here today. Here's a one-verse story. It says in the book of Genesis, Ya'azov ish et aviv et imo v'davak be'ishto. An individual leaves his parents and cleaves to another. One does not become one with another. One cleaves to another. The verse continues, V'haya levasar echad. And they become, it's not one flesh, as it is often translated. Basar doesn't mean flesh in this instance. Here, basar likely means kin, or better, relationship. V'hayu levasar echad. The two become one relationship. In this conception, two entities, two individuals cannot become one. Instead, they can bind themselves together, cleave to one another, be the clarifying complement for the other. In Judaism, relationships reveal wisdom through binary pairings that communicate an encompassing totality. Without injustice, there's no justice. No sanctity without mundanity. No Shabbat without the other 6 days. And there's you, and there's me, and there's you, and we need each other to fully comprehend who each of us is. When the light of dawn cleaved the darkness on the morning of Yom Kippur, the high priest knew it was going to be the most exhausting, most dangerous day of his year. It is a day for communal recalibrations and for new beginnings. He will lead rituals and make offerings designed to ensure for another year the continual outflow of Kedusha, of holiness, from the epicenter of his community, the temple. And he will enter its core, the Holy of Holies, a room designed specifically for God, its entrance screened off and obscured by incense. It's a small space, God's abode on earth, into which the high priest, and only the high priest, would enter just once a year on Yom Kippur to atone for his people and to pray for their welfare in the new year. The Holy of Holies was a dangerous place to enter. To safeguard himself and to prevent impurities from contaminating the temple's most sacred precinct, he will wear his personal protective equipment. A layer of white linen, and over that, the golden garments of the high priest. He dresses in the garments, and a rope is then attached to his ankle so that should he die in the Holy of Holies, he could be pulled out. After he sanctified his hands and his feet, with hope and with fear, the high priest delicately moves aside the curtain that screened off the Holy of Holies to see if God was in there. And then he carefully goes in to draw as close to God as humanly possible. 10 days ago, we read a story about making offerings and drawing closer to God. In this way, the Akedah is a spoiler. The binding of Isaac binds together Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, because what we read last week, we enact ritualistically today. After these things, the story begins, Ha-Elohim nisa et Avraham, God tested Abraham. Realize that the language of nisa is different from the language of mitzvah. Testing is not commanding. Testing is testing. You can walk away from a test. Yes, this is a story of a father willingly offering up his beloved son for sacrifice. And yes, it does seem that they sacrificed children in ancient Israel. Child sacrifice. The Akedah is partially about that. Mostly, though, the binding of Isaac is a story about choice and risk, relationships and blessing. For Abraham, the story presents a moment of choice and ultimate commitment. Commitment means to give something up, to say no as you are saying yes. We all know that. We know, too, that commitment entails risk. And I need to say a word now about sacrifice so we can understand better what we are doing together on this day. To understand that, you need to know this. In the sacrificial system, the offering, a ram, a goat, is a representation of the offerer. When the priests arranged the parts of an animal on an altar, they placed them in a pyramidal mound with the animal's procreative organs and its intestines at the summit. The Bible locates the emotions and intellect in the innermost parts of the body. Thinking happened in the heart. Compassion, according to the Bible, resides in the bowels. Now, we know as moderns that we think with our brains, but like our biblical ancestors, we know too that we also make decisions in our guts. So the animal's innards, exposed at the top of the sacrificial mound, represent the innermost part of a person, their life force, their fears, their thoughts, and their aspirations. The Akedah is a truly dramatic story because commitment and risk are taken to an extreme when Abraham offers up in biblical terms the fruit of his loins, his child, who, as with our children, represents his most closely held aspirations and fears. It is a truly dramatic story, but sometimes what we read is a traumatic story. And in our important sensitivity for the feelings of the characters, the outcome of the story becomes obscured. Abraham offers everything, yet he loses nothing. He loses nothing and gains so much. By choosing to not walk away from risking commitment, Abraham secures a blessing for him and for his progeny. Risk intertwined with reward. That's what covenant is. The binding of Isaac takes place in a particular location. After sacrificing a ram instead of his son, the story states that Abraham named that place Adonai Yireh, from which comes the present saying, Bahar Adonai Yera'eh, on the mount of God where God is seen. Scholarship reveals that Adonai Yireh is another name for Yerushalayim, Jerusalem. The story of the binding of Isaac, therefore, is set in Jerusalem, on the Temple Mount, Har Adonai, God's mountain. Even more precisely, it takes place where the Holy of Holies would be built, the place where God is seen. The Akedah then is part backstory explaining why Jerusalem. Why was the temple built there? How did that place become the central location in Jewish history and myth? There's a midrash that clarifies this scholarship. It reads, "The land of Israel is at the center of the world, and Jerusalem at the center of the land of Israel. The temple at the center of Jerusalem, and the Holy of Holies at the center of the temple. The ark is at the center of the Holy of Holies, and the foundation stone from which emerged the entire world is in front of the Holy of Holies." The Midrash suggests that the binding of Isaac occurred at the mythic epicenter of the world, the binding point of everything, where creation began, where God and humans meet, in the Holy of Holies. That's where Abraham made his offering. The Midrash also elucidates further the priestly view of the world. For them, the temple and the world existed in an intimate and intrinsic relationship. The true projects could not be disengaged. Professor John Levinson wrote that about ancient understandings of the temple, but that's what I'd say about Beth Am and about our world too. What happens here within our congregation is intrinsically linked to what happens beyond it. Our temple and our world, a binary pairing, one the clarifying complement for the other. Rebbe Nachman of Bratslav used to say, "Everywhere I go to Jerusalem." Metaphorically, today we get to go to Jerusalem. Our synagogue, like all synagogues on this day, representative of the temple that once stood in Jerusalem. And this outdoor chapel, today it is the Holy of Holies, the binding point of hope and fear, our past and our future, of risk and reward, of who we are and who we want to be. In our Jewish world, everyone can enter the Holy of Holies, the place where God may be seen. Our power here, equivalent. Each of our voices, equivalent on this day. In seeking blessing for ourselves and for our community, we all have equal access to the divine. And more than on any other Yom Kippur in our lifetimes, entering our Holy of Holies on this day entails risk. For those of us who are able to be here, and for those who are not here with us, our experience quietly reverberates with the trepidation and the hope conveyed by the stories of Abraham and of the high priest entering the Holy of Holies in his temple. For them, God was an external reality, the one who gives life and the one who takes it away. For me, and I imagine for many of us, divinity is discovered within, sanctity revealed through our human relationships, through being in each other's presence. But whereas the high priest donned his PPE to protect himself from God, on this day, to draw close to one another here in our Holy of Holies, we wear our PPE to protect ourselves from ourselves. And we don't need to look past our mask-covered noses to see a potent symbol of our capacity to harm and to heal. And here we are. In person and online, we are together. Survivors of a year of tohu vavohu, of tumult. wounded from this grinding pandemic, made fragile from an historic spike in anti-Semitism, still scabbed from an insurrection in our capital, from 20 years of a failed war, we are scarred, and we are here, gathered together in a synagogue inextricably linked to the world. Although we have done a very good job preventing COVID-19 from spreading in the midst of our community, other societal ills have penetrated to the core of this house of the people. Our relationships, further attenuated by the polarization and misinformation that has cleaved America, and, like incense in Jerusalem's temple, obscure our vision of one another, making it difficult to comprehend who each of us is. But today is for recalibrations and new beginnings, a sacred occasion to recovenant with one another and with God, to cleave ourselves from the mistakes of the past year and to cleave to one another. And in a few moments, we will read a haftarah that critiques our power to harm and encourages us to harness our godlike capacity to heal, to bring order to the tovu vavohu in our world. Az yibaka kashacha orecha, v'aruchatecha mehera titzmach. These hopeful words of Isaiah are the conclusion of a conditional if-then statement. This is Isaiah's then to these well-known ifs. If you unlock the bonds of wickedness, if you share your bread with the hungry, if you house the homeless and clothe the naked. But there is one more if leading to Isaiah's then. And it took the experience of a pandemic. It took more than a year of not fully being able to see so many of you in your entireties, in your three dimensions, and for you not to fully see me in mine. It took a recognition of any abrasions I may have caused to any of you during my first year as your senior rabbi. It took all of that, and the need to write this sermon, and a helicopter flying overhead to clearly see, for the first time, the ultimate if, the three-word statement that immediately precedes the then embroidered on my talit. 3 words. Mibesarecha lo titalam. Do not hide from your basar. As in the one-verse story from Genesis that I told to you at the beginning of this sermon, the word basar does not mean flesh here either. It means kin, or better, relationship. Do not hide from or ignore our relationships, for we need each other in order to fully comprehend and to discover who we are, both as individuals and as a community. In our tradition, our sacred stories are the clarifying complements to our rituals. 10 days ago, we read a story of risk, sacrifice, and blessing. The word for sacrifice in Hebrew is korban, which doesn't actually mean to give something up. Korban means to draw close, to make an offering that draws you closer to God and God closer to you. When Abraham stood where the Holy of Holies would be built, he drew closer to God by wordlessly offering up on an altar a representation of his greatest aspirations and his fears. After he offered up a goat on the altar in the temple and sent off into the wilderness the scapegoat, the high priest entered the Holy of Holies and risked drawing close to God in order to speak words seeking expiation and blessing for his people. And as we have gathered together online and in person in our Holy of Holies, how may we as a community draw closer to God on this day of new beginnings? Isaiah tells us, we start with our kin, with our relationships, and risk drawing closer to one another through expressions of vulnerability. We speak aloud to one another our fears, our transgressions. We draw closer to each other through our heartfelt offerings of words, and we risk on this day the articulation of our aspirations. So these are my aspirations for us as we enter this new year. They are words that I first shared in writing to you as I began my tenure last summer. But after these many months of waiting for healing, of yearning for an end to this present darkness, they seem ever more vital. May we, as a synagogue community ever aspiring to sanctity, strive to do better, to do more. Let us channel our learning and our abundant resources into a stream of justice, a mighty river of compassion and righteous action that sweeps away dams of racism and bigotry and engenders in the Bay Area a restorative floodplain of shared prosperity and of equal opportunity. And when we do that, then our light will cleave like the dawn, and our healing will spring up quickly. Then, when we call, God will answer. God will say, Hineni, here I am.
If you're able, please rise, page 253 for Avinu Malkeinu.
Avinu Malkeinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Honeinu Vaneinu, Ki Ein Banu Masi. Aseh Imanu, Tzedaka v'chesed. Aseh Imanu, Tzedaka v'chesed, ve'oshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu Vaneinu, Ki Ein Banu Masi.
Avinu Malkeinu, Almighty and merciful, answer us with grace, for our deeds are wanting. Save us through acts of justice and love. We invite forward Susie and Charlie Rothschild for the honor of holding the Torah. Stand right next to the cantor. Page 256.
Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'Chanud Adonai. Adonai, El Rachum v'Chanud Adonai. Ech apayim v'rav chesed.
Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh V'Norah, Shema.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh V'Norah, Shema. Gadlil Adonai iti, Oner Mima Shemo Yachadav.
You just want to sing more and more. It sounds so great. So we are reading from the end of the Torah. Our traditional reading for Yom Kippur is the Parashat Nitzavim, famous words from the book of Deuteronomy beginning with 29:9, the image of all coming together, all types, whether you're new to the community or you're long part of the community, whether you're streaming or you're here in person, old and young, everyone coming together to be in the service of God. We are honored with some terrific Torah chanters this morning. There was Max, who's going to lead us. If you're following along in the text, it's on page 266. And for the honor of the first Aliyah, it's a delight to invite forward our Rabbinic Transition Committee. We'll have you come up to offer the blessing before the Torah.
Nice. Yamad Rishon.
Come on in close.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach, Baruch Adonai Hamvorach le'olam va'ed, Baruch Adonai Hamvorach le'olam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Amen.
Amen. Atem netzavim hayom kulhem lifnei Adonai Elohehem rashehem shiftehem ziknehem v'shotrehem kol ish Yisrael tafhem neshehem v'gereha asher b'kerev mechanecha mehotev etzeha ad shoev memecha le'Avraham bivrit Adonai Elohecha uvalato asher Adonai Elohecha koret imha hayom.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Amen.
Thank you to Rebecca and Donovan and Rachel and Mike and all those others that have been part of the Rabbinic Transition Committee and team. You certainly didn't know what you had ahead of you when you signed up, but I will say you done well, so we appreciate it. We know the work continues. Our second Torah chanter this morning will be Lisa Whitmore. We're on 29, beginning with verse 10. 29, beginning with verse 10. It's the honor to invite to rise and to offer the blessing before the Torah, our High Holy Day choir.
Ya'amad hamakela shel kihilat bet am. Okay, אחד, שתיים, שלוש. Baruch Adonai Hamvarach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Leman hakimotcha hayom lo le'am v'hu yihye lecha le'Elohim kasher diber la אשר נשבע לאבותיך, לאברהם, ליצחק וליעקב. ולא איתכם לבדכם, אנוכי כורת את הברית הזאת ואת האלה הזאת, כי את אשר ישנו פה עמנו עומד היום לפני אדוני אלוהינו, ואת אשר איננו פה עמנו היום.
1, 2, 3.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam natan b'tokeinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yasher Koach to our whole choir who graces us with talent and passion and hard work and compassion. We certainly know that music can open the chambers of the heart. So we appreciate everything that you have given and all the hard work that you have provided us these entire holidays.
So we're going to continue now with chapter 30, verse 1. The second, you see where it is in your prayer book. Down there on page 266, the second major paragraph. Yeah.
And Henry Brill will be reading our Torah this morning, and we appreciate Henry being here. For the third Aliyah on this Yom Kippur morning, we invite up and we encourage you not to be bashful. All of the health professionals in our community, the doctors, the nurses, therapists, social workers, dentists, hygienists, health aides, residents, we want all of you to come on up and join us on the bima and offer these sacred words. I see you out there, so I'll start calling you out if you need to. But we need each of you to come on up and join us. I used to think the hero of Yom Kippur was Sandy Koufax, but I actually know that there are heroes behind us. All right. Do you have the blessings? The blessing? Baruch Adonai Hamvorach, Baruch Adonai Hamvorach le'olam va'ed, Baruch Adonai Hamvorach le'olam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu kol ha'amim, ונתן לנו את תורתו, ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen. והיה כי יבואו עליך כי כל הדברים האלה, הברכה והקללה אשר נתתי לפניך, והשוותה אל לבביך בכל הגויים אשר הדיחך אדוני אלוהיך שמה, ושבת עד אדוני אלוהיך שמעת ושמעת וקולו ככל אשר אנוכי מצווך היום אתה ובניך בכל לבביך ובכל נפשך.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher machar banu tikrat emet, v'chayei olam natan b'tokeinu. Baruch atah Adonai Unetaneh Torah. Thank you so much to all of our health professionals that are up here, that you've guided us so well over the last 18 months. What a challenging months for you. And as a community, we salute and praise all that you do. We've just had our health professionals up here to offer the blessing for the Torah, yet we also do know that each of us in our own way have the power for healers, to be healers. We turn to page 273 for the Mishaberach Lecholim, our prayer for healing. Someone who needs healing, renewal of body, renewal of spirit, I invite you to add their names out loud so we can add them to our prayer. For the honor of lifting and dressing the Torah, we invite forward Mark Schnitzer and Rachel Kleinberg. We're on page 274, and we ask you all to once again rise.
Nice. וזאת התורה אשר שם משה לפני בני ישראל על פי אדוני ביד משה.
Rabbi Morrison talked about in his sermon the Haftorah that we'll be reading this morning, and communities all across the globe will be reading the words of the prophet Isaiah, the fast I desire. Our member, Lisa Rauschberger, will be offering the blessings, which are on page 275, and then the commentary and the translation, as well as the Hebrew for the words of Isaiah, are on page 276, 277, and 278.
What is that?
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nviim tovim v'ratza v'divreihem hanemarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'Torah uv'Moshe avdo Uv-Yisrael amo, uv-Nvi'ei ha'emet v'tzedek. Kira v'garon al tachsoch, kashofar harim kolecha, v'haged la'ami pisham, u'livet Yaakov chatotam, ve'oti Yom Yom Yidroshun V'dat Rachai Yechpatzun Kegoy Asher Tzedakah Asa Umishpat Elohav Lo Azav Yishaluni Mishpatei Tzedek Kirvat Elohim Yechpatzun Lama tzamnu velo raita, ininu nafshenu velo teda. Hen beyom tzomchem timtzeu chefetz, v'chol atzvechem tingosu. Hen leriv umatzah tatzumu, ulahakot be'egrof resha. Lo tatsumu chayom, lehashmiya bamarom kolchem. Hachazeh yihye tzom evcharehu, yom anot adam nafsho, alof ke'agmon rosho. V'sak va'efer yatzia, alazeh trik ratzon, v'yom ratzon l'Adonai. Alozeh tzom evcharehu, pateach artzubot resha, hater agudot motah, v'shalach ratzutzim chofshim, V'chomota tinateku, halo faros laraev lachmecha, va'anim merudim tavivait, ki tire arom tichisot v'chisito, umivsarcha lo titalam. Page 280. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, tzur kol haolamim, tzadik bechol hadorot, ha'el hane'eman, ha'omer ve'oseh, ha'medaber u'mekayem, shekol devarav emet v'tzedek. Al haTorah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al ha'neviim ve'al Yom HaKippurim hazeh shenatata lanu Adonai Eloheinu l'mechila u'l'slicha l'chapara l'chavod u'l'tifaret. Al hakol Adonai Eloheinu anachnu modim lach ומברכים אותך, יתברך שמך בפי כל חי, תמיד לעולם ועד, ודברך אמת וקיים לעד. ברוך אתה אדוני, מלך מוחל וסולח לעוונותינו ולעוונות עמו בית ישראל, ומעביר אשמותינו בכל שנה ושנה. מלך על כל הארץ, מקדש ישראל. 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 מלך על כל הארץ, מקדש ישראל ביום הכיפורים.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for beautiful chanting of the words of Isaiah. On page 286, it's an honor to invite forward our member and our state senator, Josh Becker, to offer the prayer for our country.
God of holiness, we hear your message. Justice, justice you shall pursue. God of freedom, we hear your charge. Proclaim liberty throughout the land. Inspire us through your teachings and commandments to love and uphold our precious democracy. Let every citizen take responsibility for the rights and freedoms that we cherish. Let each of us be an advocate for justice, an activist for liberty, a defender of dignity. And let us champion the values that make our nation a haven for the persecuted, a beacon of hope among the nations. May our actions reflect compassion for all people within our borders and abroad. May our leaders and officials embody the vision of our founders to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. We pray for courage and conscience as we aim to support our country's highest values and aspirations, the hard-won rights that define us as a people, the responsibilities that they entail. We pray for all who serve our country with selfless devotion, in peace and in war, from fields of battle to clinics and classrooms, from government to the grassroots, and all whose noble deeds and sacrifice benefit our nation and our world. We are grateful for the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness that our founders ascribed to you, our Creator. We pray for their wisdom and moral strength, that we may be guardians of these rights for ourselves and for the sake of all people, now and forever.
Amen.
I invite you to join with me for the prayer for the state of Israel on page 288. Avinu, you who are high above all nations, states, and peoples, Rock of Israel, the one who has saved us and preserved us in life, bless the state of Israel, first flowering of our redemption. Be her loving shield, a shelter of lasting peace. Guide her leaders and advisors by your light of truth. Instruct them with your good counsel. Strengthen the hands of those who build and protect our holy land. Deliver them from danger. Crown their efforts with success. Grant peace to the land, lasting joy to all of her people. And together we say, Amen.
We once again invite you to please rise on page 290 for words of Eitz Chaim as we return our sacred scroll to the Ark. Thank you, Mark.
Eitz Chaim hi,
We continue on page 296 and remain standing.
Eloheinu, Elohei Avotinu v'Imotenu, Tavo lefanecha, Tefilateinu, Adonai Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu, Tzadikim anachnu, velo chatanu, Ava.
Together, our God and God of all generations, may our prayers reach your presence. And when we turn to you, do not be indifferent. Adonai, we are arrogant and stubborn, claiming to be blameless and free of sin. In truth, we have stumbled and strayed. We have done wrong. Please turn to page 304. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha begalui uvasater, al chet shechatanu lefanecha besinat chinam. The ways we have wronged you openly and secretly, and harm we have caused in your world by hating without cause.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha bifrakat ol, v'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'ma'achal uvmishteh.
The ways we have wronged you by losing self-control, and harm we have caused in your world through consumption of food and drink. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha begilui arayot, v'al chet shechatanu lefanecha beimutz halev. The ways we have wronged you through sexual immorality, and harm we have caused in your world by hardening our hearts.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'neshech uvmarbit, v'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'masa uvmatan.
The ways we have wronged you through greed and exploitation, and harm we have caused in your world through dishonesty in business. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'hirhur halev, v'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'irchilut. The ways we have wronged you through our innermost thoughts, and harm we have caused in your world through gossip and rumor.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'chapat shochad, v'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'chilul Hashem.
The ways we have wronged you by offering or accepting bribes, and harm we have caused in your world by profaning your name in public. Of judgment and will, God of forgiveness, forgive us, pardon us, lead us to atonement. Please be seated. We take a few moments now for silent confession. You can look at the material on pages 308 and 309. Page 306. please turn to page 310, Ki Anu Amecha.
Ki anu hamecha, anu vanecha, anu avadecha, anu Anu nachalatecha, anu tzonecha, anu charmecha, anu fiulatecha, anu rayatecha, anu segulatecha, anu avecha, anu
Just a couple of announcements before we conclude our morning service. The study sessions will start as soon as we're done. And there are several online via Zoom. You can find the schedule on our website. There are also going to be in-person sessions. The one that's going to start immediately after this service. Both will be down in the Beit Kehillah patio, right in front of the Beit Kehillah at the bottom of the stairs. Our Jews with Light Skin White, Our Role in Racial Justice, led by Jason Solomon. And the one in the next session will be Reptile Brain Crouching at Your Door. Come on, you gotta come to that one. Teshuva in Light of Contemporary Behavior Science, led by Lisa Whitmore. And we want to extend a special thank you to all of our chanters this morning and everyone who participated in the service. You did a beautiful job. Kristen Yawitz, your piece was just beautiful. And we'll see you back here at 4 o'clock for our afternoon service.
Yaila